from the background of the main characters in the days leading up to the assassination to the event itself, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln was an event that impacted America forever. Okay, so I don't know who saw the last progress speech, but I'm just going to leave off where I was there. So it's midday on Friday 14th, 1865, which is Good Friday, which is, you know, the Friday before Easter. So basically, Abraham Lincoln was in a very cheerful mood that day, because obviously the war had just ended a few days ago. It had been a tough 4 years, and his son, oldest son, who was in the military, had just gone home, so he was happy to see him. Also, at first he had invited General Grant to go to the theater with him and Mrs. Lincoln, but Grant's wife and Mrs. Lincoln did not get along well, so they ended up declining that. So instead, Major Rathbone and his fiancée Claire Harris ended up attending Ford's Theater with the Lincolns. So as you see, here's Ford's Theater. They arrived pretty late to the play, as it already had started. So it wasn't like they waited for them. They did as normal. And when they arrived, people noticed that they came to the presidential box. The place stopped. The crowd all stood up and applauded, and the orchestra played a song to commemorate the president. So then, go to the opposite side of John Wilkes Booth, what he was like. So when he found out, he basically called a meeting at the Kirkwood Hotel with the only three of his co-conspirators that were in town at that point: George Atzerodt, David Harold, and Lewis Payne. And George Atzerodt was aspired to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson, and Payne and Harold were aspired to kill Secretary of State William H. Stewart, and of course Booth would kill Lincoln himself. Alright, so Booth, that day he went to Ford's Theater. He'd been there before, he performed there, he picked up his mail there, but he still went out to scout out. He put a piece of wood inside the box for him to use later, and he also carved a hole in the back of the door of the presidential box. So he went there to scout out and kind of came back later. So now we're gonna skip towards the play itself. So Booth, he enters Ford's Theater, and no one really bothers him because he's a normal there. And it's about 10:15 at night p.m. And as he walks in, he slowly just trots up towards the presidential box. And it's about the start of the third and final act of the play. And he gets up there, and Lincoln's normal bodyguard was not there. Instead, it was just a stagehand that worked at the Ford's Theater. Apparently, rumors are that Lincoln's bodyguard went across the street to get a drink from the tavern. And so it was just a stagehand kind of looking over the presidential box. Booth hands him a piece of paper, and this day we still don't really know what it said on that piece of paper, but he hands it to him, and he lets Booth into the little area, which for this night they connected the two box suites into the one presidential box. So he walks up behind, and he's creeping up, as you kind of see here, and there's a door. He looks through the carving that he put earlier in the day. He sees everything's going fine. He waits for the time. He knows he's seen this play before. He waits for the exact time, but when he knows to be the best point to do it, he opens the door so quietly and walks in that no one even in the box notices him. He gets up right behind Abraham Lincoln, so close that he pretty much could put his hand out and touch him on the shoulder. And he just shoots him. And in the back of the head, as you can see here, there's some other depictions. It's a very famous depiction of what it looked like. Here's another scene from the back. It's kind of funny. So he shoots him in the back with a .44 caliber Derringer pistol. I mean, one single shot. So if he would have missed, which was very possible, who knows what could happen. The bullet went to the back of Abraham Lincoln's head, entering on the right side, and it became lodged right behind his left eye. So that's pretty exciting. When Rathbone figures out that Booth, what has happened, he lunges towards Booth, but Booth also had a knife on him, and he stabs Rathbone in the arm. Rathbone will be okay. But after that, he jumps off of the balcony there onto the stage, because the only way out was that way, safely. So, but there's actually a picture of George Washington and some American flags on the draping. And he actually gets a spur of his boot trips on that, and so when he comes to the ground, he stumbles and actually breaks his leg, which will become very important later on. and he utters his famous line, holds up his bloody knife and says, "Sic semperus tyrannus," which is "thus always the tyrants." And then rumors also said that he said, "The South is avenged." Two very important lines. The only doctor that was there at that time was Dr. Charles Leal in the crowd. He comes up to the booth, or the box, I guess, and he looks, and once he finds that Lincoln had been shot, he knows almost immediately that the wound is mortal and he's going to die for sure. So, but they do move him across the street to the Peterson house, where he lays in a bed until about the next morning, and about 6:20 a.m. he dies. That's where Secretary of War Edwin Stanton murmurs his famous words, "Now he belongs to the ages." So after that, basically the biggest manhunt in U.S. history started. As you see, over $100,000 reward for them, as you know, that was a very big amount at that time period. Here you can see kind of a map of how he went from Forest Theater all the way down there, but that maps aren't as cool, so we're going to go to this little thing. Safe. So he gets there, and even though the gate's closed, the guard lets him through, which is very surprising. And he and David Harold meet up in Maryland, and they continue to travel south. One of the other famous stops is at Dr. Samuel Mudd's house, where he actually sets Booth's legs and fixes it after he fell off the balcony. And because it was very painful for him to ride, it slowed him down. So they stay there for a few days before moving on. And they have to cross the Zacchaeus Swamp with the help of a black slave that they hire. And they end up, so then they, after that, they attempt to cross the Potomac River, but the first time they actually fail. And they end up back in Maryland, because it was at night and they went the wrong way. So the second time they cross the river successfully and get down to a place called Rappahannock Ferry. And finally, they end up staying at Garrett's farmhouse in Port Royal, Virginia. And that is where they is surrounded by Union troops inside of a barn. They set the barn on fire because they would not come out. And finally, David Harold does come out and surrenders to the Union troops, but Booth will not come out, so Sergeant Boston Corbett will actually shoot Booth in the back of the head, killing him, and ending one of the worst days in our American history.